Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevena Bajalac, welcoming you once again to the podcast where we bring you incredible guests, people who are experts in different fields. And today we have someone who invented something called Hypernomics. He's going to talk about that. His name is Doug Howarth, coming to us all the way from California. Welcome, Doug, to the show.
Thank you so much, Nevena. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I'm very excited to have this episode and have this talk with you. I personally don't know what hypernomics are, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. And tell us a little bit more about you. So I want to leave this episode you talking about it and you introducing us to this concept.
Well, I remember as you started your introduction to me, talking about leaders in the field that you like to address. Since I discovered the field, it's pretty easy to lead it. So I've discovered this field just a few years ago, and what it is it's a new form of studying economics where you balance what people say products are worth, which is value, versus how much they have in their pocket to spend, which is demand. And it ends up working in 4 dimensions. That's the reason for the hyper. Hyper means existing in more than 3 dimensions. And nonomy, N-O-M-Y, is a field of study. So hypernomics is a field of study in 4 or more dimensions. And while it sounds complicated, it's actually something that all of us do all the time. So I got the idea watching my wife buy a washing machine.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so we're going out. The washing machine broke. We needed a new one, and so we've been traipsing around town trying to look for one. We went to, I don't know, the 5th or 6th store, and we're both getting a little tired and crabby. And we walk up to a row of machines, and she sees one. She likes this machine. She says, at home we have a pretty small drum. And she says, I like to have a bigger drum than we have at home. And so I thought capacity versus price. She's working a 2-dimensional problem right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, we've only got one delicate cycle at home. It'd be great if we had more cycles. And I thought cycles versus price, and then capacity versus price. She's up to a 3D problem. And so we liked this one machine. We both liked the machine that we saw. And then we saw the next one up the line, same brand, but bigger. It got more of everything. And including the number of dollars for it went up. And so what about this one? She says, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. And then I realized that we were going to add a quantity of 1 to the number of those washing machines that were going to be sold in the year. And then I realized that was quantity versus price. So she was looking at capacity, cycles, price, and quantity. She was solving a 4-dimensional problem in her head. And then I looked around the whole store, and I realized that everybody in every aisle was solving the same problem for themselves by themselves. And it turns out that what happens is you can plot where these points are, and it turns out that people self-aggregate their behaviors. They basically see things the same way. I mean, there's variations, but collectively they see things the same way. And because they see things the same way, you can actually quantify what it is that they're doing, and then make determinations of how new products will enter the market and what the market will pay for it. So that's what that does. It's a field of study that relates back to something you already know. Now I can tell you that the continuous thought. Now after I wrote the book, I actually saw how this has been. I maintain this has been endemic to mankind since we began, because I got done doing a little trail run about 4 months ago after I finished the book, and I saw a little tiny. I went over back out into the parking lot, and there was this asphalt that my car was parked on, a big pavement that was put down there, and I saw this little reddish black ant moving about, and I thought, well, Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, would study ants. He says, I'm going to study this ant for a little bit. And so this little reddish black guy started going counterclockwise, in little fits and starts. And after several tens of seconds, he gets around and he ends up tracing out a full 360 degrees. But he's a little bit further out than he was when he started. And then he traces another 360 degrees and he's out further still. And then I get down a little bit lower and I watch him trace out the next 360 degrees. And I realize that when he stops, what he's doing is he's getting up on the higher pebbles that are part of this asphalt. And he's looking around and I realized that this ant's doing reconnaissance. The ant's doing surveillance. So I race home and I type in ant surveillance into my computer and I go, bam. And sure enough, ants do surveillance. There was a scholarly paper about how ants do surveillance. And so when ants look for new places to live, they look for the same thing that you and I do. They want to have a certain amount of floor area. You know, square footage in your house, square meters in your house. They want a certain floor area. They want the ceiling height to be just right. Not too high, not too low. They like it to be very clean, and they want to be away from the neighbors. And so this little group of ants has been around for over 140 million years. And so I maintain that since humans are as smart as ants, we've been doing surveillance for this amount of time. And we do the same kind of analyses where we're figuring out the square footage of the house and how clean it is. And then the ability to get away from neighbors. There's only so many houses that are away from the neighbors. And so that starts to form the demand curve there.
That's really, really interesting. I mean, you put, like you said, everything we've been actually having in our behavior just into
Right.
a book. So tell us a bit more how Hypernomics, how business owners, if they're launching product or service that they want to sell, how they should follow the rules of Hypernomics.
Well, Hypernomics is, at its core, it's nothing more than pattern recognition. So when I saw this little ant do what he was doing, I recognized there was a pattern. He was going out further and further, and he was peaking up high. And so what I realized he was doing is he was trying to find out what was nearby him. And so the same kind of pattern recognition, or a little bit different type of pattern recognition, can be applied to a restaurant. So here in the United States, when COVID happened, they would let us go to restaurants, but the restaurant had to have all the seating outside. And so we have a favorite place here in town that we would go to. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm from California. I'm just a little bit north of Los Angeles, a little town called Santa Clarita. And so we have this favorite place in town that we went to. And they had about seats for 100 people inside. But outside, they only had seating for a little over 30. And so we would go there, and the line would be out the door once COVID happened. And I said, well, you know, there's got to be something wrong here. Now, I'd paid particular attention to this restaurant. We've been going there for years at this point, about how the clientele comes in. And they usually come in ones and twos, parties of ones and twos. And what they had in their patios, they had 3 tables for 6, 3 tables for 4, and only a couple of tables for 2. So I asked the restaurant manager, Kayla, come over here. I said, do you want to make more money? Well, she said, well, sure, Doug. Who wouldn't? I said, well, here's what you need to do. You see, you have more people, you have more parties of 2 coming here than you have parties of 4 or 6. So you need to take out some of the tables for 6 and replace them with 2s, and take out one of the tables for 4 and replace them with tables for 2. So she did this. We came back next week and I said, look, track what you're doing here on your receipts. And her revenue went up 25% in 2 months, simply by rearranging the furniture. Now, it turns out when you do the research that there's people that track here in the United States how many people go to restaurants. And it turns out there's more than twice as many parties of 2 as there are parties of 4. And so it actually matches what historically people do in going to restaurants in the United States, and that's the reason it works. Okay. Now, your results may vary in Dubai or Tanzania or wherever you find yourself located, but this is basically just trying to find the pattern and then trying to react to the pattern so that you can get the best result.
Mm. And tell us a little bit more, how did you build a business around the Hypernomics, right? You mentioned you build a business, a company, and tell us a little bit more what you guys do and who are you helping?
I'm sorry, you went a little digital there. Could you repeat yourself, please?
Yes, absolutely. I just asked, you mentioned you built a company around Hypernomics and your
Yes.
business. So can you tell us a little bit more about who are you guys helping? How are you helping? And how did you, started the company from this idea?
Yeah, I started the company with just one single client, and wasn't very big. And but we started out working for Lockheed Martin, and which is a big defense contractor, and then we've added in some other big defense contractors. We've also worked for NASA, and a few of your listeners probably heard of Virgin Galactic, the people that shoot people up into space. So we worked for them, and then we worked for a little tiny teardrop trailer company that's up in the Northwest. And what we started to do was we said, well, we want to patent the display of the mathematics that we have here. So I managed to get a patent, that's over my left shoulder there, for the software that displays how this stuff works. So we sell consulting services, tell people what to do, then we sell software. And we're kind of insistent when people buy the software that they get training, because this is a brand new field. Quite frankly, I discovered it and I didn't know what it meant when I first found it. I go, what's this? How do you think in 4D? And it turns out that everybody does this, but it hadn't been codified. It hadn't been written out. It hadn't been observed fully. So the idea is to get people to understand the nature of their behaviors and their customers' behaviors so that they can actually place products that their customers will like and buy.
Yeah, very interesting. So with your clients, what are some problems that you see them having most common? Do they come to you maybe for consulting, or maybe some things they're not paying attention to and they should to grow their business?
Yeah, well, one of the things that a small general aviation manufacturer came to us for, uh, they didn't know if their plane that they were building was priced right. And so they had this certain plane they were building. I can't tell you the name of the company, it's classified, but it had a certain number of seats in it. And it's like when you're buying a car or a van, that you pay more for a van than you do for a comparable car, because more seats, the more it's worth. And then in planes, it's kind of like getting fast cars. The faster the plane can go, the more it's worth, and the range and everything. And so we went off to this one client and started to figure out what their plane was worth. And it turned out that the thing was undervalued by about $100,000. And it worked out that the number of planes that they needed to sell to make a profit, they could raise the price $100,000 and they would have made a profit. Now I say would have. They liked what we did for them, and we marched off, and then they brought in a new CEO who decided to cancel the whole program. And then this whole company basically went down the tubes. So, but we gave them the right answer.
Yeah.
We did give them the right answer. We also worked for a large aerospace company on a program that was not classified, but I can't get into the details about that. But we were competing as part of this team against other teams, and our group had a certain price and value to their product that we were going to be able to promote. But another team against whom we were competing basically spent a whole bunch of money and created a viable product during the program that they spent their own money in aerospace, the United States, and defense. That's pretty much unheard of until recently. But they built this really great product, and we said, well, they're so far ahead of you that if you keep trying to chase them, you're just going to be flushing money down the toilet. So we told them not to pursue the program anymore, and they stopped. So we saved them money.
Yeah, some people,
Yeah.
if they listen, they definitely get results. If they don't,
Right.
then
Yes. Right.
so
Exactly.
yeah. So Doug, what I would like to ask you next is, if you are about to give a tip or advice to people doing their business, or maybe a lot of startups listening to this podcast, what is some advice that you would give them?
Well, I give them the advice that first I would tell them to buy my book, I'd say shamelessly, because this actually walks you through the idea of I was here. The idea of I was here is it starts with Hansel and Gretel in the book in the first chapter. And Hansel and Gretel famously, they were escorted into the woods by their evil parents, left to die, but they managed to find their way home because they left pebbles along the way that would tell them how to get back. Well, that when you're dropping that pebble, you're basically saying, I was here. And what Hypernomics does is it figures out where everybody has been in every market by finding the equivalent of little pebble drops that would show you, if you were to map it, it would be, you give you the latitude, the longitude, and the altitude. So that actually works out to be an analogy to how the market works. Is every time you buy, when we bought that dishwasher, or I should say washing machine, we bought a certain capacity and a certain number of cycles, and we paid a certain amount of money for it. And so as we bought that, and more people bought that, it created a point that you could track in the economic space, basically saying, I was here, and so were 10,000 other buyers of this product. And so when you take all of them together, they start to form these aggregated results that, again, people trying to think the same way, where people think relatively the same way. There's like a swarm of, like a flock of birds. You've probably seen at sunset in Europe, you see the starlings that start to flock, especially in over Rome, the starlings will flock in a group. And there's kind of an outer edge and a lower edge and an upper edge and inner edge to that. Well, you can actually describe that mathematically, and that's kind of what Hypernomics helps you do, is to describe that.
So yes, we are inviting everyone to go and purchase Hypernomics from Doug Howarth, and definitely you will get some insights and learn a lot. So Doug, let's wrap up this episode. I love to ask my guests, maybe you building your own business and
Yes.
things you learn over the years. Do you remember something specifically that you wish somebody told you about at the beginning, or you made a mistake and you wish you knew maybe before you started your business?
Well, I just saw your episode on trying to overcome sales objections. I wish I had trained myself a little bit better about sales, because we have a really valuable product, but until I wrote the book, it was kind of hard to explain it simply. So the book, I mean, at 300 and some pages, basically walks you through the whole process that gives you more and more information about how to do this. I wish somebody had told me when I was starting that it was going to be pretty hard. It's very, very hard to start a business where people don't understand what you're doing right off the bat. So now, happily, I just got this award here 2 weeks ago. I went to an international conference and won the overall best paper and had a chance to speak to 450 people at one time. So the idea is starting to percolate out into industry, and I would say, the business is hard, and I'm sure you know that too. It's hard to start up something. But that said, it's been very worthwhile too. I wished I had started it earlier. Of course, I wish I came up with the idea earlier, but the idea comes when you get the idea. So you can't really wish away the fact that you figured it out in your 50s rather than in your 20s, which is what happened to me. So
it's never too late. So many success stories with people starting in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think every idea comes at the right time. You had your knowledge, your experience to comprehend that idea. So I think that's brilliant.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it took a little bit of, all the work that I had done prior to figuring it out set me up so they could figure it out. That's kind of what another way of saying what you just said is to You
Yes.
lay the groundwork for making breakthroughs and things like that.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you, Doug, for taking the time to speak to us today, to share your knowledge, your theory, and everything you created. So it was a pleasure having you as my guest.
Thank you so much, Naveen. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank everyone for listening. Make sure to go and get Doug's book, Hypernomics, and read, learn, implement. This is an incredible tool that you can use to price and when you're creating your product and services correctly. Thank you for listening. Make sure to like the episode, share, leave us some comments, likes, and share with at least one person that can also benefit from this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.